Hey y'all, I'm Lauren and welcome to Cantina Cast. Today I am talking about the High Republic comic The Blade by Charles Soule. And this comic, it was a 4-issue run. The final issue is coming out on Wednesday the 29th. So if you have been keeping up with this one, it's about to conclude, and I wanted to go ahead and put a video out of me covering these 4 issues of this series, so that way if you're thinking about reading this, you can kind of see like what to expect going into it. So first of all, I'm just going to give my general thoughts, and without any spoilers, I'll let you know before I get into those, but without any spoilers, if you are a fan of the High Republic, I really feel like you have to read this series. So from phase 1, Porter Engle was a character that we met kind of briefly. Like, I mean, we saw him a few times, but like we didn't really spend a ton of time with him. But from that first appearance, you can tell that he's got an interesting past. And he's just like a really cool character. And so from that experience of meeting this character in phase 1, I knew that going into phase 2, I was excited at the possibility of getting to see more of Porter Engle. And this comic, I feel like he really does shine as like just one of the coolest Jedi. And reading this series, it did kind of reinforce what's been going on for me, which is that in phase 2, the comics are just working a lot better for me this time around, and this comic is another example of that. So if you like High Republic, even if you've been kind of skeptical of phase 2, I think you should give this comic a chance, because I feel like it was really well done, and we got a cool little beginnings of Porter Engle's character that I really hope that we get to spend a lot more time with this character going forward, because my only complaint about this series is that I wish it was longer. Like, I wish I could get to know this character more. I mean, for that to be my only complaint, I mean, I feel like that's pretty good. So if you're thinking about giving this comic a try, I would highly recommend it. If you're interested in Porter Engle at all, I would recommend giving this one a try. And so, very general summary of what you can expect from this comic. We're meeting Porter and his sister, Barash, and they are super close and they're working together on a lot of missions. And so this series, it is showing us one of the missions that they go on together. And during this mission, they have to go try to stop a siege that's going on the planet Gansevoor. Okay, so now I'm going to start talking about each individual issue of the series. So if you haven't started it yet and you don't want spoilers, now is your warning. Okay, so this first issue, part 1, it is opening a century and a half before the fall of Starlight Beacon. So this is right in the middle of phase 2, so you're probably already familiar with some of the circumstances surrounding the stories of phase 2. Like, the opening crawl gives you a quick summary of like it's a time of exploration. There's a lot of Jedi Pathfinder teams going out into the Outer Rim, and this is a time where communications are being built up and hyperspace lanes are being built up as well. And so this first scene of the first issue, we see Porter Engle is making a meal in like the coolest way possible. Like, he looks like, it's funny because like he looks like he's really doing something here, but then like when people are trying the meal, it's like apparently really bad. So he still loves to cook when he's younger, but he's not any good at it yet. So I guess he's gonna get better with time, which is fun. So then Porter's sister Barash comes in, and the name Barash is probably going to be familiar to you if you're a comic reader, because there's mention in the Vader comic of the Barash vow. And this is something that the Jedi do when they feel like they've kind of lost their way and they need to get back in touch with the Force. It's like them kind of removing themselves from society in a way. And so the fact that Porter's sister's name is Barash, we're like, okay, so I guess we're about to find out kind of where this term comes from and what it means. We've got a while until that happens. But at this point, she comes in and she says that there's trouble outside. So Porter goes out there, and there is a disagreement about a theft of ambercrystal, which is a particular resource that can be found on this planet that they're currently on, which is called the Bone World. And so what we have is like two groups that are, they're squabbling over like one of them stole it from the other one. And so what we see in this scene is that Barash is really good at sensing people. So she's able to tell Porter which one of the two of them is lying, and they're able to work together to settle the dispute. And so she's kind of like the person that senses things. She gets like a read on the situation, and Porter's like the enforcer because he's an expert with the lightsaber. Then we have a flashback which goes back to 25 years ago, where we see Porter and Barash as younglings in the Jedi Temple. And this is when they meet for the very first time. And in the comic, they refer to themselves as brother and sister, but we see in this flashback that they're not biological brother and sister. They actually were just really, really close in the Jedi Temple when they were growing up. So they like kind of became brother and sister over time. So they've got that found family thing going on in a big way. Then we come back forward in time to the present, and Porter and Barash, they go visit the Office of the Frontier. And this is like an office that the Republic has set up in the Outer Rim to help with outreach and kind of like connecting them to some more of the Outer Rim planets. And so they go there because they're looking for whatever their next posting is going to be. They end up picking a posting on Ganzivore, where there's not a ton of information about what the posting entails, but they do know that a city is being besieged by a rival. So they hitch a ride with the Pathfinder team to get there. And on the way there, we do see more evidence of Porter's extreme lightsaber mastery, where like one of the other Jedi on the ship like wants to spar with Porter because he's just widely known as being like the best. We also find out during the trip to Ganzivore that there are no comms there. There's pretty much, long story short, the reason that there's no comms there is because the communications beacons this far out are not very reliable. There's not really a ton of communications beacons set up yet. And so Porter and Barash go into this knowing that they are not going to just be able to call for help whenever they need it. But the plan is that the Pathfinder team is going to drop them off. Porter and Barash, they feel pretty confident that they'll be able to handle it even without the comms. And once the Pathfinder team is coming back through, then they'll pick them back up. So now going into part 2, we see that Barash and Porter arrive on Ganzivore, and they're in like the main city on the planet, which is called Horatio. And Horatio, they have like the planet's centralized government, but the way that things work on Ganzivore is they don't interfere in the disputes between the cities. So it's kind of like the cities just sort of have to deal with things on their own. That's why one of the people from Firevale, the city that's being besieged, put out the call to the Jedi for their help. They're briefed on the situation, and they're told that Firevale is the name of the city that's being besieged by Bethune, which is their rival. And we do know going into it that Firevale has a particular resource that the rest of the planet needs, that they're really the only ones who have access to it. And so because of that, it sounds like that's going to be like a factor in terms of why they're being besieged. The envoy says that they just want a peaceful solution to the situation. The Jedi agreed to take some supplies with them to deliver to Firevale. And they do emphasize when they're doing this that, you know, there better not be any weapons or explosives in these supplies, because like that's not what the Jedi are about. We want there to be a peaceful solution as well. So it sounds like as of right now, everybody's saying they want peace, but you do kind of get the sense that, I mean, how long is that really going to last, right? And because of this, that's why Porter and Barash agree to bring the supplies, like the food and stuff, but they're not yet willing to get further involved until they understand like the full scope of the situation, because they don't want to like accidentally get involved in something that's actually just going to exacerbate the issue and make things get more violent than they already are. So pretty much as soon as they arrive on the outskirts of Firevale, Porter is already having to prove himself with his lightsaber skills once again, because they start shooting at them. Porter deflects all the blaster shots, and he's like, take me to your commanding officer. And they pretty much have to listen to him because he just showed them that like he's more powerful than they are. So they're like, okay, fine. Like, we'll take you to talk to him. And so like right when they're about to walk into the commanding officer's tent, we get another flashback. So we're going back in time again to where Porter and Barash are Padawans again at the Jedi Temple. We learn that the Jedi Council was actually threatening to split the two of them up because they were so attached to each other. And they come up with a plan that they are going to try to prove to the council that the two of them actually work way better when they're together, and that splitting them up is actually hurting more than it is helping. And at first they're kind of like, Porter's like, well, isn't that being kind of deceitful? And Barash is like, not really, because it's the truth. Like, when we're working together, we are like the most powerful, because she has that skill of sensing and Porter has the skill of actually kind of like being the muscle with the lightsaber. After they make this agreement together, then we go back to the present and we see that Porter and Barash are now talking to the commanding officer of the Bethunian army. What they tell Porter and Barash is that Firevale kidnapped their princess and like abducted her and made her come to Firevale. Porter and Barash are like, okay, well, let us figure this out. Like, just hold off on your attack. We're going to go talk to Firevale and see if we can get to the bottom of this in a better way. At first, it seems like the Bethunians agreed to do this, but pretty much as soon as Porter and Barash leave the tent, the field marshal, like, calls someone on his comm and is like, okay, we have to end this right now. So, I mean, that was pretty short-lived. Before that happens, Porter and Barash, they are able to make it to Firevale to deliver the supplies. And that is when they find out that the so-called kidnapped princess is actually the prince's wife, and she married him voluntarily. Now we know that this situation is way more complicated than it originally sounded like it was. And at the very end of this second issue, the mercenaries that the Bethunians hired, they show up. So it's not only is there the Bethunian army, but now there also is like a even bigger mercenary army with bigger, fancier weapons that shows up too. And then we get into part 3. And at the beginning of part 3, Porter is going down the wall to confront the mercenaries, and he convinces them to just wait a little bit longer, give Barash a little bit more time to try to get to the bottom of this. And again, they say they agree. And I mean, but you know, you can't really trust them at this point, right? But during this, while Porter's trying to stall and hold them off, Barash goes and talks to the princess. And the princess explains that she really does truly love the prince, and she actually is pregnant. And she knew that her own people, the Bethunians, wouldn't accept her because they already hated Firevale to begin with. And so she's like, and now that I'm like pregnant with the prince of Firevale's baby, like, it's just gonna make it so much worse. So I knew I wouldn't be welcome there, and so I really had no choice but to come here. Meanwhile, while this conversation is going on, the field marshal does ask the lead mercenary, so the people that he hired, to kill the Jedi. At first, she doesn't want to do it because she's like, that's a pretty big risk to kill Jedi. But he tells her that there's actually no comms out here, like, no one will know that we did it, like, we can get away with killing them pretty much. So she says that they'll do it if they can plunder the city for any treasure or riches that they can find for 12 hours. As a result, they start attacking, and this is before Barash has really had a lot of time to even get to the bottom of the situation. But at the end, we have this awesome visual, which this was really like my favorite part of this series, of Porter just like being so cool, like about to you can tell that he's just about to like completely unleash on these people, where like it's interesting about him because up until this point he's been making every effort to try to be very nonviolent and to get a peaceful solution. Don't resort to fighting if you can help it. But once he realizes that the fighting is breaking out whether you want it to or not, he's just gonna like completely go crazy on them. And I just like there's just this really cool image of him at the end where like you just get the sense of like how powerful this guy is, and like he has now made the decision to fight you, so you better just get out of his way. Like I just loved it so much. It was really cool. Now I'm going to talk about part 4, and this is the one that comes out Wednesday. So if you do not want spoilers, now is your time to turn back if you have not read the most recent issue yet. But in part 4, what happens is that Porter is fighting the leader of the mercenaries, and at the same time, while they're facing off, the mercenaries and the Bethunians are turning on each other because the mercenaries want to plunder Firevale. They want to completely destroy Firevale at this point. Like, they've decided that they're going to kind of go against what the field marshal previously said because they've decided that they want to do it their own way. Meanwhile, Firevale, the rulers of Firevale are trying to decide if they should open the gates and let the Bethunians in. And there's debate about like how effective would that be, where some of them are like, don't open the gates, that's just giving them what they want. And others are like, well, if you open the gates, at least like it will try to reduce some of the damage that's happening to the city, because at this point the city is being all out attacked. Like, it's not just a siege anymore, like now they're being fully bombed. And during all of this fighting, we also learn that the princess, the so-called kidnapped princess, she was actually in on the plan the whole time, and so was her husband, the Prince of Firevale. And she does admit to Barash that this plan was put in place to try to undermine the Queen of Firevale, because her and the prince, they were having trouble with the queen, and so they wanted to force her to abdicate. So then Prince Colden, the Prince of Firevale, would be the new ruler. And once he became the new ruler, then this prearranged treaty that they had already made with the Bethunians would be put in place. And unfortunately, now this plan has completely blown up in their faces, because they were not expecting that the city would be attacked like this, because the mercenaries turned against the field marshal who hired them. And so the field marshal was in on the plan too. And so they knew that the siege was going to happen, but they did not anticipate that it would actually result in violence like this. When Barash tries to tell the queen, don't kill the princess, she's pregnant, that's when we find out also that there never actually was a pregnancy. It was the princess was lying to Barash about that. And this is something that Barash takes pretty hard, because Barash's skill is that she's really good at sensing if people are lying or not. But because she was in a situation where she was rushed to make a decision and to try to get information from people, and she didn't really, I don't know, I feel like Barash was kind of being hard on herself, because she was under like a tremendous amount of pressure and didn't really have time to get to the bottom of the situation, because the attacking was already going on while she was still like getting the full story. So, I mean, I know she's a Jedi and she's supposed to be able to handle pressure, but I don't know. I did feel really sorry for her, because she feels like she's had this massive failure because the princess deceived her, when it's like, I don't know, it's kind of understandable how that happened, you know. After this happens, the princess, she goes out to the wall and she stands up on the wall and tells the Bethunians to stop attacking. And Porter was out there holding his own up until this point, which is pretty impressive. But once the princess tells them to stop, and she tells them like everything that's happened, then the Bethunians, they start killing the mercenaries. The mercenaries realize that now there's no profit in this for us anymore, and so we need to get out of here. The fighting has now stopped, but a lot of people have died in this process of the truth coming out and the princess putting a stop to it. When Barash comes out and tells Porter the story, Porter, he also is like understanding of how that happened, and he doesn't blame her. He's like, well, we did the best we could. I mean, he's saddened by the news and he's disappointed, and he calls it ugliness. So like, he agrees with her that it's terrible that things happened this way, but he also understands that like, we did the best we could with what we had. And it doesn't like shake him to the core like it does Barash, because she's still blaming herself at this point. She feels like she has lost her way with the Force, and that she wasn't listening to the Force when this was going on. She feels like really the only thing that she can do is to temporarily part ways to focus on getting back on the right track. And Porter's like, are you leaving the order? And she's like, no, I'm not leaving. It's just temporary. I just need to kind of like get myself going in the right direction again, and then I'll come back at that time. But at the end of this issue, we see Porter explaining this to the council, that she's temporarily, you know, taking some separation to try to get back where she feels she needs to be. The council agrees with this. I mean, which they kind of have to, because she's made the decision that she's doing this whether they support her in it or not. She really believes that this is like the path that she absolutely has to take to be serving the Force properly again. And Porter, while she's doing this, he's still going to continue working with the Order and going where he's needed. And at the end of issue 4, we do see a page that says Porter Engle will return in the Broken Blade, which sounds like it's going to be another series for him, which that made me really excited because, as I mentioned earlier, my only complaint about this comic is I wish it was longer because I want more time with this character. So I'm really excited to see more of him. I hope that Barash is in that one too. I guess it depends on when this takes place, if it's happening during the period of time where she's away. But I just love the way that the two of them work together. I love it how they both have great high level skills, but they also know like what they can be like complimented with as well. Like they both know where their own skills are, and they know that like together they are stronger. And I think that that's always like something that's really cool in a partnership like this, is when they're both like bouncing off of each other. So yeah, I really loved this series. This honestly, it might have been my favorite of phase 2. At least like one of my favorites. That's a certainty. So I'm really looking forward to anything that we might see Porter in going forward. But yeah, let me know what you thought of this one if you read it. I definitely think it's one of the strongest phase 2 stories that we've seen. So let me know if you enjoyed it as well. But thanks so much for watching, guys, and I hope y'all have a great rest of your day. Bye, y'all.